you're not a poison-type Pokemon, you're a fairy-type Pokemon, and those Make It Rains are really going to do a lot of damage because of that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the hope is you can just negate both of your abilities and put it to sleep.
True, true.
Yeah, perhaps will no longer be good as gold. Let the rust a little bit.
Oh, well, let's give Golden Go a chance as... I'll be honest, I've never actually seen a shiny Toedscruel before. That is an incredibly groovy Pokemon to kick off our last round of Swizz here in Baltimore.
It's kind of a looker, right? We've seen some ugly shiny Pokemon this weekend, but I'm kind of a fan of this one.
I like the hot pink.
So there's a great lack of abilities out here, right?
Yes.
Toedscruel, very excited not to have its. The other side of the field, a big deal. No Intimidate the other way, which doesn't really matter. But Ursaluna also does really want its ability, right? Normally it has those guts. It powers up when it gets burned. It will instead be a scared bear if it gets burned right now. And both these Pokemon are going to have to be a little bit concerned about potentially being spored. The Toedscruel is holding that Covert Cloak item, so the Fake Out from Incineroar are not going to be able to do anything to stop it.
Terastallization already turn 1 onto the Toedscruel. It's going to turn into a water-type Pokemon, so no longer has to worry about the threat of a Flare Blitz from that opposing Incineroar. So cannot be flinched, cannot be taken out in one hit, and also can't be landing a Spore against the opposing Ursaluna who just protected. Unfortunately, that is exactly where Toedscruel targeted, but it is also the fastest Pokemon on the field. We see Incineroar follow up with that Flare Blitz. Just look at how little damage it does thanks to that Terastallization, and now the Galarian Weezing with a Strange Steam into that Incineroar, boosted by the Choice Specs as well.
When it hits pretty hard, that's a decent bit of damage there. Of course, with no Spore going in on this Ursaluna, it makes this turn a little bit trickier where it is burned and actually burned as long as this Weezing is out on the field. But still, sort of a tough type matchup there where it'd be easy to give up a knockout the other direction. However, now, Incineroar really being threatened here. Either of these Pokemon could potentially pick up a knockout on it, so at least we'd get some value there. But yeah, do you want to risk giving up either of these Pokemon potentially so early in the match?
That's a really tough call to make because the amount of pressure not having abilities is doing right now is fantastic. You also, again, have that perpetual threat of Spore putting a Pokemon to sleep in the future. Won't necessarily work out right now as that Incineroar is holding the safety goggles and the Ursaluna already has a status effect, but it now also has a Terastallization into the normal typing. Acid Spray will connect and drop the special defense of that Ursaluna, lining it up for a 1-2 combination. Some big damage coming through from the Weezing. It lost the Choice Specs, but still is able to bring it down into the yellow with a Strange Steam and gets that chance to confuse the Ursaluna come through, and it's not going to pay off this turn, but that's okay. Normal type Facade boosted by that Terastallization will return a knockout into the Weezing.
Yeah, so a bizarre combination of events there. The knockout probably makes a big difference there. I think the added damage to the Choice Spec can be very close to a knockout. Intimidate going to land here, which doesn't make too big of a difference, but what does make a difference is now Ursaluna has become more powerful. It is again gutsy, no longer a scared bear, but we will see one of these two speedy Pokemon enter the field. I think either of them could be a big offensive threat to either of these Pokemon, but
yeah.
Now that Weezing is out of the picture, there's much more opportunity for Zachary to kind of shift around and kind of play his team the way it's meant to be played.
I love the synergy here as well with the Typhlosion taking the field for Wolfe, because you have that Acid Spray on the Toedscruel dropping the special defense of the opposing Pokemon, and even if it wasn't within knockout range of a full health eruption at this point, that is some great synergy having Typhlosion as a closer in this instance.
Yeah, it's pretty tough to switch in here too, right? Where the Toedscruel does have that Earth power, which would easily put enough pressure on Incineroar, but you can kind of just safely smash Eruption if you want to.
Yeah. First, this Ursaluna, unfortunately, will fail to protect and hit itself in Confusion, which means Eruption is going to take a one-hit knockout, or a knockout that Ursaluna, excuse me, in this hit. The Incineroar is still able to hold on for a little bit longer, but like you were just saying, Scott, the threat of Earth Power here is going to certainly do enough damage to pick up that KO.
Easy knockout there, and yeah. It's not... The group of Pokemon I was not expecting to see on the field together when today started, but you see why it works there, right?
Yeah,
and, I think Acid Spray in general is a really cool move. I think it's something that a lot of trainers probably like to incorporate on their team, but like the learn set is not super great on it. We see the Flamigo entering the field now and Porygon too. So a Pokemon that's very good at kind of just stalling out games. Perhaps an option for a Trick Room to get around the Choice Scarf for this Typhlosion, but again, probably uncomfortable ground for Zachary, where you don't think through how you're going to handle the situation the night before.
For sure, and I think as well, this is one of those opportunities in the game where you're really getting as much information as you can as possible. I think the really unique thing about facing off against Wolfe in a tournament, running a team like this, is that the way he plays it is going to be very different from anybody else, and the fact that he's relying on the synergy between Toadscroll and Typhlosion is really exciting.
One thing to keep in mind, you've already seen the Typhlosion with that Choice Scarf locked into Eruption.
Yeah.
We do know Flamigo knows Wide Guard, right? So to see if he goes for it, no, it allows it to happen. Because getting an attack off for it, but that is a lot of damage down.
It is. Will activate the Focus Sash on that Flamigo, but it won't get the opportunity to attack because Toadscroll is very fast and is faster than that Flamigo and will pick up the KO there. So even though Porygon 2 has the opportunity to use Trick Room here, it is a bit of an uphill battle. We'll have to find its way through 3 Pokemon remaining on Wolfe's side of the field.
Yeah, and that's tough to do, right? Because I can't see any way that Porygon is going to be able to knock out this Toadscroll before it gets a Spore off.
Yep.
So I think of a situation where Wolfe's pretty good. Maybe get a couple of Acid Sprays off and then eventually get another attack off with one of his special attackers to perhaps close the game. Unconventional strategy, but you see why he's undefeated to this point in the tournament.
For sure. And again, the way that he approached this team is very different than what we saw from Justin in the previous round. I do think that having, again, this synergy between the Typhlosion, the Toadscroll, also the Galarian Weezing as well, was really cool to see. And I'm sure Zachary's taking every second as this game closes down to figure out what the best game plan is for adjustments.
Yeah, I think you can see the power of this Toadscroll too there.
Yeah.
Gonna set up this knockout for Typhlosion, but I think what's really great about what Toadscroll's doing there is that the threat of Spore is so significant that even though you have a Pokemon with Eruption sitting there, it kind of attracts all the attention for it,
Yeah.
You don't want to get hit by that quick Spore, and again, not something trainers normally have to deal with. I guess no longer a quick Spore, but any Spore is fast enough once all of the offensive Pokemon have been taken care of.
For sure. So let's go ahead. I mean, I want to talk about adjustments here because I think we saw what this team does on Wolfe's side of the field. You see the Weezing next to the Toadscroll, you see the Typhlosion follow up, and you have to assume that there's just another attacking Pokemon that would fit the situation in the back of his party. I think Zachary started the game off very strong, bringing the Pokemon with safety goggles and bringing the Pokemon that would burn itself so it wouldn't be put to sleep by Spore, but unfortunately just could not find an opening there for those 2 Pokemon to have an impact on the game. Going into game number 2, is there any mix-up he can do here Pokemon-wise to give himself a bit more of an advantage? Yeah,
so I guess if you look at the Pokemon he didn't bring, right? I mean, I think one of the reasons why we didn't see either of them, it's the 2 Pokemon who are weak against Fire-type attacks.
Yep.
It was that Golden Go and that Amoonguss.
Yep.
I think perhaps you consider that as an option where after the Terrestrial Leash was committed, which I think it'd be very difficult to kind of just sight read how Wolfe is likely to play this matchup. I think Amoonguss could have come in and been helpful at least, and that may be the switch up, right? I think Golden Go is pretty tough to bring, where I think you're going to struggle to get in a position where you don't have to Terrestrialize to avoid getting destroyed by Typhlosion at some point in the game, and that's one of the things that's really challenging with this team, right? Where all eyes are kind of on the combination of this Weezing and on this Toadscroll, but you still have to wind up in a spot at the end of the game where you can actually survive just getting run over by Typhlosion. Certainly there's the option to Wide Guard. The problem is if you're locked in a Wide Guard, then just poor Porygon there trying to carry on its own, but maybe that would have been an option to try to get the Trick Room up, and maybe something as simple as that sort of tactical adjustment can move the needle for him.
Yeah, I mean, if you get Trick Room up earlier on, Ursaluna all of a sudden moves first, and then you have a lot more openings, but it looks like we are going to see a commitment to the way Game 1 was played by both these trainers, with once again the Ursaluna leading alongside of the Incineroar. So given that there was no visible Pokemon adjustment, you have to assume Zachary's going to approach this turn 1 much differently.
Yeah, you'd think so. I mean, or maybe the turn 2, right? Because I think,
true.
He got through that first turn, and then I think maybe he gave up a little too much of Ursaluna's health in order to take care of the Weezing.
Yeah.
The problem then is, what is the alternate path of knocking out this Weezing, right? Do you think you can get Golden Go out safely somehow? I don't know what the path to that is going to be to avoid just getting spored. But so far, we have the Protect, we have the Fake Out. This looks familiar.
It indeed looks familiar, and that's what it's going to be. We see Spore going into that Protect, and now the Flame Orb will activate. Guts still shut down, will not be active here, but at least the Ursaluna doesn't have to worry about taking a nap.
So I'm curious now if you see any adjustments, right?
Yeah.
Where if you're in Wolfe, you can assume, like, we're not just going to do the same thing forever, right? You're not going to just let me win. So, what could be different, right? There wasn't really any RNG the first time. We saw the confusion, but it didn't matter.
No.
So I guess if you're Wolfe, you're probably willing to take the same trade, but you're going to try to guess, okay, well, what is Zach going to do different this time? And there's something I can do to exploit that where, I think it'd be tempting to try to go for a spore in one of these slots, anticipating a deviation, but then if you don't get it, you're further behind than you were in the first game.
For sure. So here's our first deviation from game number 1. It's going to be Zachary who terastallizes first, and it's, again, the normal type terastallization on this Ursaluna. So trying to take advantage of the fact that Facade will still have boosted damage thanks to the status effect, and that terastallization will give it a bit more of a boost. But just like we saw in game number 1, it's going to be Acid Spray into that Ursaluna to drop its special defense very sharply. Another adaptation here, instead of knocking off the choice specs, it will be Parting Shot on that Incineroar. So still will reduce the amount of damage this Weezing can do overall, but I think more importantly, giving Zachary the opportunity to pivot a Pokemon onto the field while the Ursaluna is still healthy, and that Pokemon's going to be Flamigo.
Yeah, I liked it a lot. You still get the same damage reduction here, so Ursaluna's still going to survive. It gets confused once again, so this could be critical.
I don't know. We'll have to see. Will Ursaluna find the opportunity to attack through this confusion?
Oh, no.
And unfortunately, it does not. But I mean, to try and look at things in a positive light, the burn reduced the amount of damage it took, so...
That was much less confusion damage. However, this seems real bad. I really like the mix-up from Zachary, who I think kind of played it half a turn faster this time. However, because of the confusion, does not successfully trade the Ursaluna with the Weezing. Instead, really on the back foot now, where there isn't a clear path toward avoiding just losing Ursaluna or taking a ton of damage for whatever Pokemon is in that slot. And then things start looking bleak quickly.
Yeah, and I will say, I loved how Wolfe was trying to cycle through his choices there. We saw in game number 1 that the Toad Scroll is actually faster than the Flamigo. So I think what he was trying to decide there is, would the Flamigo stay in, and therefore he should go for Spore, or should he go for something else? He locked in Spore, but Zachary will be switching out the Flamigo into that Incineroar. So will not be put to sleep thanks to the fact that it is holding the safety goggles. And it's a double switch from Zach. Going to be sending in his final Pokemon here, and it is confirmation. Same floor as last time, but this time it's Porygon 2 next to Fake Out, which is kind of nice.
Yeah, Spore hitting the wrong target here, but I don't think Wolfe's going to be too upset about it. And this time with the choice specs, we'll have to see how much this does. Not great, but now we're in that situation where, well, you can just Spore the Porygon slot potentially if you'd like to, and there isn't like a super obvious way to stop that. Weezing here not doing a whole lot, but you can switch out, right? You don't really need to be first with Spore in this situation.
True. I mean, one thing you could consider here is potentially switching in the Ursaluna to try and buy time. You can try and land a Flare Blitz into the opposing Toad Scroll. You know that if Wolfe decides to keep it on the field, he's going to have to dedicate that terastallization to it, and that could be a good opportunity for yourself in the future to know that, well, at least the Weezing, at least whatever else he has in the back will not be able to terastallize. And after a moment of abilities activating here, we will eventually see that he swapped in a Pokemon, and it's going to be Palmon.
Yeah, Palmon, a pretty good time matchup with both these Pokemon, especially since you're a pretty safe situation where you don't have to worry about a Trick Room going off. It is the Ursaluna that comes back in, so not wanting to deal with any potential spores, but we're going to see a little damage tick on this burn, and at least it does successfully force the terastallization from Wolfe. Zachary otherwise was even further behind compared to game 1, but at least getting that commitment once again.
Yeah, and I think that's really the best thing that Zachary can hope for at this point in time, because you know that the Pokemon that's going to be doing the most damage on your side of the field, that Ursaluna, unfortunately has its time limited. We'll see Knockoff connect with the Toad Scroll as well here, getting rid of the Covert Cloak, so that also will open up more opportunities for Zachary to attack in the future, potentially flinching that Toad Scroll with Fake Out, but you're going to have to pivot that Incineroar out on the field again, and depending on what comes in, that Palmon has some great type synergy with the Pokemon in the back.
Yeah, pretty excited no matter what it is, right? I mean,
yeah.
You'd love to punch the Incineroar, you'd love to punch the Porygon. Even if you get the Flamigo, at least you get rid of that Focus Sash and then can deal with them the next turn. All those outcomes looking real good for Wolfe.
Incineroar switches out, and Flamigo will be taking the field in its place. Protect on that Ursaluna, going to keep it around for the maximum amount of time it can be at this point. Close combat, though, will break the Focus Sash on that Flamigo, and then Toad Scroll will eventually go for an Acid Spray into the protecting Ursaluna. And I like that play as well because you know you don't need the extra damage at this point from that Pokemon, and getting a special attack drop in, or excuse me, special defense drop in when you potentially have another Typhlosion in the back of your party where you still have the choice specs potentially on that Galarian Weezing, that just gives yourself, again, more options for that endgame.
Yeah, everything feels great, right?
Yeah.
Well, either give me the knockout or like the alternative might be even worse where you're just giving me more knockouts. Breaking the stash in Flamigo also great. You know, if the goal is an endgame sweep by that Typhlosion, you do want to get rid of the wide guard at some point. And right now in a position where you'd think that Wolfe can just attack both targets and either pick up a knockout here on both or either of them, or at least get some extra damage to the Pokemon in the back. We see the cycling continues, but not immediately leading toward any offense. At least perhaps getting Pawmont to remove its typing for a little benefit here as it gets intimidated, and hopefully, if you're Zachary, baited into using an electric type attack.
Yeah, so the one thing to keep in mind about Pawmont's electric type attack Double Shock is that assuming it does not terrasilize into that electric type, it will lose the electric typing like you just mentioned. So it will no longer be able to utilize that move as a result. So when the Flamigo comes in, assuming Wolfe doesn't cycle out the Pawmont, it won't be able to hit it for super effective damage. Now, we'll have to see what the impact will be on that interaction later on in this match as the Acid Spray connects with the Porygon 2 to drop its special defense. And really, Pawmont, I think, is okay going for close combat in this turn, all things considered.
Yeah, I mean, maybe Zachary's getting to the point where it's been weakened enough he could at least get the Trick Room off, but then you hit the question, like, well, is getting Trick Room going to be enough? You see how weakened that Ursaluna is, not exactly healthy enough to sweep within Trick Room, but has at least cycled a position now where things are a little trickier for Wolfe.
For sure, and I do think the other thing that you have to remember about Zachary's win condition moving forwards is that it's really going to be on the shoulders of the Porygon 2, as Incineroar will be KO'd by the close combat. Toedscruel will be flinched, finally, in this matchup, so that's, like, kind of cool. But I don't think Flamigo is necessarily the Trick Room sweeper that you would want in this situation to help close out game 2.
It is interesting, though, right? Where Ursaluna potentially gets to attack once.
True.
It'll be only once, but, you know, I mean, two of Wolfe's Pokemon can't protect, right? So if you can get it out at a time where you can take advantage of that, you know, at least you have that option. And then, I mean, the Flamigo's quick, but it's slower than almost all these Pokemon, right? We've seen it move after Toedscruel, we've seen it move after Pawmont. We know it's going to move after Typhlosion, who is holding a Choice Scarf, so it's actually only Weezing that can underspeed it in Trick Room.
Pawmont will protect itself this turn as Terra Blast from Porygon 2 will pick up the KO on Toedscruel. So no more threat of Spore, no more threat of Acid Spray. That Pokemon honestly has done a ton for Wolfe in this game and really forced Zachary to use all of his tools to get to this point. Flamigo will be attacking into the protecting Pawmont, and now Wolfe has his choice of Pokemon to send in. It will be the return of the Galarian Weezing, which will benefit, I think, from the fact that Flamigo's Focus Sash is gone. We'll be able to pick up KO there with a Strange Steam, and the Porygon 2 hasn't been switched out since it took that Acid Spray, so its special defense is also dropped by 2 stages.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting turn here, actually. So, yeah, I mean, both sides kind of eyeing potential knockouts. I think both sides would really like to make switches in order to regain typing, to regain status, and then on Zachary's, you know, you only really get one turn for Ursaluna, right? So you can either use it to sacrifice, or you're gonna like try to get a tactical knockout while Trick Room is still active to get one big swing. I feel like maybe a perfect course of events, Zachary can still win this one, and Flamigo playing it safe for now.
Typhlosion making a return to the field. Terra Blast will target down the opposing Galarian Weezing with a critical hit. Sludge Bomb into the detect from that Flamigo.
Oh, that's really interesting now. So now Porygon's threatening a knockout of this Weezing, which should lead us to a situation here where Typhlosion stays locked into a move the rest of the game. So we kind of a Terra Blast and a Wide Guard could be really scary for Wolfe. It kind of forces him into locking into a single target move instead. If you think that's the case, then you can try to take advantage of that, not use the Wide Guard, attack the Typhlosion instead, maybe pick up a cheeky knockout here, and then suddenly maybe Zachary takes this game and pushes us to a game 3. It's a very tense, very important turn.
There's also the threat of if that Typhlosion locks into Shadow Ball, it's only a single target move that's not going to be doing any damage to the opposing Ursaluna or the Porygon 2.
And we don't see that Wide Guard, so Flamigo's going to be bringing some heat here.
And Brave Bird indeed will crash into that Typhlosion, bringing it down into the yellow. Typhlosion chose Heat Wave. and it barely misses the KO on the opposing Porygon 2. But with Wolfe down to his final 2 Pokemon, that's it. It's just Heat Waves for this Typhlosion from here on out.
Oh, I think Heat Wave might be all he needs, though. You see Palmet coming back out here, and you might think it's a little too quick for Trick Room, but it does still have that Focus Sash intact. Probably a knockout onto this Porygon with Fake Out would allow it to survive an Earthquake, which would then cause Ursaluna to be knocked out by the burn. I think Wolfe has this one locked, but it's just by the tiniest bit of HP.
Literally by a Focus Sash, Fake Out, picking up the KO in the Porygon 2, and while the opposing Ursaluna will pick up a returning KO on this Typhlosion with Earthquake, thanks to the Focus Sash on Palmot. 1 HP and a dream. Wolfe Glick will be moving on to day 2 of this competition, undefeated.
Once again, a perfect day 1 by Wolfe, and an excellent match by his opponent as well. But Wolfe makes the call he needs to there, right? He had kind of a dominant game 1. He seemed like he was way ahead in that second game, but wound up being he needed to make that call right. Correctly use exactly Heat Wave, right? He sticks to his Fred move, which is important, and then doesn't click Eruption, which would have been a drastic failure there. And yeah, it is just that close where a different call on that turn, maybe we get a different outcome. But Wolfe showing why he is so effective at day 1 of these tournaments. Hasn't lost a game on or a set rather, day 1 in a very long time, not since NEIC.
Yeah, that is absolutely insane. I mean, Pokemon is a game with so much variance.